Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from June 13th to the 19th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. But we're going to start with this big news from Todd Harrison. So thanks, Todd, for sharing. As one of the most important Republicans on Capitol Hill for cannabis policy, Nancy Mace did win her primary election. And so this is big news for cannabis, obviously sticking around and actually being a contender in hopes that cannabis reform could eventually come, especially since Nancy Mace is the author of the States Reform Act. And while that's still the best possible bill for the cannabis industry, unfortunately, the States Reform Act is likely not going to pass anytime soon. But the good news is that Mace's win is about what could be possible in the next Congress if we see a red wave in November. But for this Congress, we continue to believe, and this is from Cowen Washington Research Group, we continue to believe that the best the cannabis sector can get is the SAFE Act on cannabis banking so far this year until we see how things will change in November. And so with that, you can pause to read this snippet here from Cowen Research Group. Well, we also got some big news, and we're going to anticipate what's coming next week, as the Attorney General says the Justice Department will address cannabis issues in the days ahead. And so I will update you on Wednesday with whatever news that we do get, but this could be potentially the Cole Memo 2.0, this time around possibly the Garland Memo, as U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland says that the Justice Department is examining cannabis policy and will address the issue in the days ahead. So I will update you on Wednesday, but hopefully this will be some updated Cole Memo that will give investors safe harbor protection, which will allow them to invest, and then will also give the banks protection from federal regulators. While I do believe that the Cole Memo, based on the time it was written, only applied to states with medical cannabis. And so it would be great if this time around the Garland 2.0 memo would apply to states with medical cannabis and, of course, recreational cannabis for all the states that have legalized for rec since. So we'll keep you updated when we get to Wednesday. Well, also wanted to share this one from Todd Harrison on U.S. cannabis. So thanks, Todd, for sharing. This one is the same snippet of news, but from Politico, as the DOJ intends to address cannabis in the days ahead. So why does this matter? The email was vague on a timeline, but it could be a sign that the DOJ is preparing to issue new guidance on cannabis. Whether that is a full reinstatement of the protection included in the Cole and Wilkinson memos is unclear. So while we wait for this, obviously, we think that this could be good news and foreshadowing of what might be to come, but we just got to wait and see. And so with that, Marijuana Moment does report that congressional lawmakers seek broad cannabis protections for legal states in key spending bill coming up next week. And so it does seem like when it rains, it pours, and we're getting a lot of potentially positive news as congressional lawmakers are urging House leaders to include broad protections for states, territories, and tribes that choose to legalize cannabis as part of a key spending bill. It's expected to be introduced next week. And so we got Earl Blumenauer, Tom McClintock, Eleanor Holmes Norton, and Barbara Lee, along with 44 of their colleagues, recently sent a letter calling on the chairman and ranking members of an appropriations subcommittee to address the issue through the must-pass legislation. And the letter includes 3 sections of language that the lawmakers hope to see in the base spending bill for the Commerce, Justice, Science, and related agencies. And so in general, the proposals would block the Department of Justice from prosecuting those who comply with their state or tribal cannabis laws, the lawmakers wrote. And while it seems like we already have many of these memos written in place, and I think that's what the Cole Memo did exactly for medical cannabis companies, that was rescinded in 2018 from Jeff Sessions. And so a rider preventing the DOJ from using its federal funds to interfere in the implementation of medical cannabis legalization, I think that's about the Cole Memo, has been renewed annually since 2014, but they're pushing for broader protections in the CJS appropriations measure. And so I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm just going to leave this here so you can pause to read if you want to see what the new language is about. But basically, they're getting to this decision based on most legalization laws at the state level were decided by ballot initiatives, the 4 dozen lawmakers say, and for this reason, the federal government should not interfere with these programs and the will of the citizens of these states, which we agree with 100%. It's just unfortunate that none of these include descheduling or, rescheduling, which the Dems obviously ran on and would be beneficial for them to keep some of their promises. But nonetheless, the recent letter to appropriators also asked that the tribe-specific language be included in the base bill for fiscal year 2023, so this is related to any tribes, from my understanding. And then finally, the lawmakers urged that the appropriations subcommittee also continue to include the medical cannabis rider that's been annually renewed for nearly a decade now. And so while I say that, it might not be the Cole Memo because I don't believe it's been in place since 2018, and it's very hard to keep track of all these efforts to try and protect the industry, although nothing actually ever seems to get done. But with that, here's the language if you are interested and just wanted to read about that. And so finally, the draft bills are being marked up at the subcommittee level this week, with the full House Appropriations Committee set to vote on them next week. And so we will get some news whether these do pass, and hopefully this is better than nothing, while spending bills for other departments and divisions that have yet to be released are also expected to touch on cannabis and other drug policy reform issues. So lots to keep you updated with. with. More efforts out of Congress is apparently they're pushing cannabis protections for immigrants, advertisers, and banks in spending bills. And so this comes from a separate Marijuana Moment article, different from the one that I just shared with you, but highlighting some other efforts that are apparently being made in Congress. And so while there's nothing in here that was really relevant to us cannabis investors and that we don't already know, just wanted to highlight this part here, as there are also high-level talks in both chambers about moving a package of cannabis reform legislation this year that would include banking protections. So good to see that repeated. Link is there if you wanted to grab it. But can you believe they want to try to protect immigrants from the outdated cannabis laws when they can't even keep the campaign promises that they ran on that got them elected, while many American citizens are still sitting in jail for non-violent drug offenses? It's unbelievable, and shame on this Biden administration. But with that, happy to report that Tom Angle is sharing apparently big news from Tom's angle. No pun intended there. The White House drug czar says the Biden administration is monitoring cannabis legalization policies because the current federal approach has not been working. Yeah, we've been waiting for you to get something done, so from now until November, please do something, as he also voices support for broader drug harm reduction, potentially including decriminalization. So while there is time from now until November, we do hope that something, will get done. I'm happy to share this one from the Financial Times, as it sort of builds off of the last story, mainly highlighting that the sentiment from the Biden administration is changing, and they're looking at different ways to address this issue, potentially by keeping some of their campaign promises, which would be great. But with that, this is titled U.S. Pivots to Harm Reduction After 107,000 Overdose Deaths Last Year. And while I would believe this, if they would hold Big Pharma accountable for some of this, but if they don't, then I'm just going to call bullshit. But with that, just wanted to share what this article is highlighting. White House drug czar says cannabis legislation and safe injection sites will also be reviewed. And so while they're just saying they're being reviewed, it doesn't really mean much. So just going to share this article here. Not going to go through it all because, again, this is all just talk. You can grab the link below if you want. Otherwise, you can pause to read this snippet here. But just highlighting that the sentiment is slowly but surely changing in the right direction as we head into November. And with that, wanted to share some snippets from investment firms. This one from BTIG, from Isaac Boltansky, who's an analyst there. So keep in mind, these are just, an analyst's opinion, doesn't mean that they're right. So take them with a grain of salt. But we remain bullish on the cannabis banking effort and assign a 75% likelihood of enactment during this Congress. And so you can pause to read, but it's a really big snippet as well. So if it's not clear, feel free to grab the link below. But just to highlight, BTIG remains bullish on cannabis banking after a busy week in Washington. And with that, wanted to share another one from BTIG. This one comes from Camilo. So keep in mind, still just speculation, but more optimism as we have a line of sight coming into focus for federal cannabis reform measures moving forward, and we remain bullish on SAFE Plus passing this legislative session, after which we would expect to see a significant re-rating of the U.S. MSOs. And this comes in line with a potential Garland or Cole Memo 2.0. That would be massive, and this would, again, set the stage into November. But we still have to wait and see. With that, though, you can pause to read these snippets. A line of sight coming into focus. This is another one from BTIG. While, in addition to a possible SAFE Plus bill and a Cole Memo 2.0 from AG Garland, additional legislative catalysts for cannabis include below. And so you can pause to read. Might not be able to get that whole snippet, so you can grab the link down low here. But so on to some state news, as this one from Marijuana Moment. Teen cannabis use dropped dramatically in Colorado in 2021. State study finds. Take that, prohibitionists. And so with this, happy to relay that the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's Healthy Kids Colorado survey found that young people were 35% less likely to use cannabis in 2021 than in prior years, continuing a trend that contradicts prohibitionist arguments that legalization would lead to skyrocketing youth consumption. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So just wanted to share this as it is great news, and so you can pause to just take a look at the chart here. And so there's a little bit more information on the study. Otherwise, you can grab the link below if you're interested. But we're going to move on. Well, this one comes from New Cannabis Ventures, highlighting that New Jersey adult use sales predicted to remain strong after a successful launch. And so I'm not going to go through this snippet here. You can pause to read just based on how the first month went. And then so with that, public companies with adult use approval. And so we've got Acreage Holdings, Ascend Wellness Holdings, and so you can pause to read to learn more about Acreage and Ascend and what operations they have going in New Jersey. And then with that, we've got Columbia Care, who does have a deal to merge with Cresco Labs if that deal goes through by the end of the year. So do consider that Cresco would benefit if the deal does end up going through, as they will merge with Columbia Care to become a new entity. Well, we've got Curaleaf Holdings, Green Thumb Industries, and TerraSend Holdings. And so you can pause to read for a bit more info on Curaleaf, Green Thumb Industries, and TerraSend in the state of New Jersey. Well, lastly, we've got Verano Holdings and Air Wellness. So you can pause to read as well. And so lastly, just a bit on how the medical sales progressed from 2019 up until April when they launched for adult use. So you can pause to read this section here. Well, lastly, the conclusion, which I will read for you. BDSA is predicting that New Jersey's adult use sales will push the state to become one of the fastest growing cannabis markets in the the country. That's great to hear, especially as they do approve new dispensaries online. With a strong foundation set by the medical program and rapidly rising consumer participation, BDSA expects New Jersey to be the third largest contributor to overall U.S. cannabis sales growth by 2026, as New Jersey is forecast to bring in $530 million in adult use sales in 2022, bringing total cannabis sales in New Jersey for the year up to almost $800 million, the company predicts. And so that comes from BDSA. Obviously, that can change from now until then, but happy to relay that positive news coming out of New Jersey after taking so long to launch. With that, we've got this one from Canna Investments, and while unfortunately I do not have access or a subscription to this link, just wanted to share that the Fast 50 2022, Chicago's fastest growing companies, did include many U.S. MSOs. And while we obviously wish the stock prices reflected this growth, as they haven't for the last year and a half, which means that at some point in the future they certainly will, the good news is that Cresco Labs, Verano Brands, GTI Grows, and PharmaCann landed at the number 4, 5, 6, and 7 fastest growing Chicago-based companies over the past 5 years. And while I did not get to read the article, I don't know if each of them are 4, 5, 6, and 7. I just get that from what he wrote here. And so happy to share that, obviously, and they will continue to expand this growth as Illinois does approve those extra 185 licenses in time. But on to some MSO news, as Curaleaf celebrates opening of Lancaster, Pennsylvania dispensary, as Curaleaf Lancaster is the company's 5th new location to open within the Keystone State this year, expanding its retail presence to 17 locations in Pennsylvania and 134 nationwide, with more expansion planned in the state for 2022. And so good news for Curaleaf continuing to expand, and so you can pause to read for more information. Well, Trulieve, happy to announce the opening of new Port Richey, Florida medical cannabis dispensary as of 9 a.m. on Thursday, June 16th. And so with that, Trulieve continuing to expand, much like Curaleaf. And while I don't know the number off the top of my head, Trulieve is leading the way with the most physical retail dispensary locations as of right now, but Curaleaf is close second behind. And so with that, you get more information on the sort of deals and perks that you get being a Truliever or a Trulieve customer in Florida. And with that, we go to the Office of Medical Cannabis Use. And so for this past week, they increased their qualified patient count to 730,159, which represents an increase of 1,909 patients week over week. So while we have seen that slow down as we head into summer, good to see that continuing though, as more Floridians are choosing a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. And so this week, from June 13th to the 17th, it does not seem like new dispensary locations were approved by the department. And while this sort of contradicts that, I think that this news might have been included in the week prior to that. And so that would be why this is not included. But with that, we can see dispensations for June 10th to the 16th. We can see all the MSOs that operate in the state of Florida, and we can see the number of dispensing locations that they operate. We can see the number of milligrams of THC sold, the number of milligrams of CBD sold, and the number of ounces of smokable flower sold. And so they're steady and strong across the board, but of course you can check week over week to see if any of the MSOs that you have invested in that operate in Florida are either increasing or decreasing their market share. And so with that, we got some good news out of California as well. This one from Hirsch Jane. So thank you, Hirsch, for sharing this one, because I would not have found this if it wasn't for Hirsch, so I'm actually going to give you a follow. But good news out of the California Department of Cannabis, as apparently they're on a tear in June. 30 new retail licenses issued in just the past 2 weeks, as many as all of Q4 2021, which we do love to see, as it means regulators are feeling the heat and putting the pedal to the metal on approvals, as the monthly record of 31, which came from March 2022, will be beat by these June numbers, which is huge and crucial, as almost half of these stores are in underserved areas. And if you actually want to combat the illicit market in California, you got to open legal stores in areas that are underserved, where the black market is dominating, so that you can legally supply that demand and try and take sales. So good job, California. You're heading in the right direction. While medicinal cannabis hiring continues in CT, which is good that their medicinal market is continuing to grow in the right direction as businesses await recreational licenses. And so while Connecticut did legalize for adult use, they're aiming to launch their adult use program near the end of 2022, hopefully sooner than later. But this again just highlights the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition, providing opportunity to your citizens in the form of jobs and the economy in the form of tax revenues and other ways. And so with that, just happy to share, as business owners vie for those spots, the medicinal market in Connecticut continues to bud. As CT Pharma, a medicinal cannabis producer in our state, is looking to hire 30 more new employees. The jobs, according to the company's head of recruiting, are full-time. And our pay and benefits are in fact good, but what we notice is people coming because they are absolutely passionate about this industry, said Michael Evans, Verano Holdings head of recruiting. And so while MSOs are vying for these licenses, so are small business owners and minority entrepreneurs in the state. So just happy to relay that the demand is very strong, as Verano is one of the thousands of applicants waiting for word if they'll get a rec license here in our state. The good news is that the Department of Consumer Protection said they hope to have the first round picked within the next couple of months. So we will find out that in time. However, from my understanding, I don't remember the number offhand, but they're not going to be approving very many licenses in the first round, as they're keeping the regulations tight and, rolling this out as slowly as possible, which sucks for the industry. We don't know if the MSOs are going to benefit, but we're just going to have to wait and see, as I will relay in a few months when we get this news. But with that, I wanted to share this one from MJ Biz Daily, as Pennsylvania judge rules that medical cannabis operators can resume vape sales. So this is a very interesting development, as a Pennsylvania judge ruled ruled that medical cannabis operators can resume selling vape products that were recalled 4 months ago, a major win for the state's cannabis businesses. As in February, state cannabis regulators recalled more than 500 vape products, claiming that they contained ingredients not approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for inhalation. And because of that, producers, processors, and retailers feared that the ruling could have led to devastating financial losses. And so a group of cannabis companies called the Medical Cannabis Access and Patient Safety, or MMAPS, sued the State Department of Health, claiming that the recall was unfounded. And if they're suing, must mean that the regulators don't have a very strong case, because obviously they won, so it's good that they sued. But MMAPS noted in a statement that the Commonwealth Court judge's order this week allowed dispensaries to immediately restock the previously recalled MMJ vape products pending final resolution of the case. And in fact, the court noted the department itself previously approved the recalled products for patient use following stringent quality and safety testing and found no evidence of a single adverse event related to any recalled product, Casiopo said. So why would they have recalled the products in the first place? So I'm really glad that they got this team together and fought back for another win. And so with that, state regulators indicated Thursday, though, that they intend to continue this legal fight as they're likely going to try to appeal this. Of course they would. The latest decision by the court lifts an automatic stay, and by doing so prevents the department from stopping the sale of the recalled products, which apparently you didn't have any grounds for stopping in the first place. Maggie Barton, deputy press secretary for the Pennsylvania Health Department, wrote in an email to MJ Biz Daily. And so with that, just happy that the MSOs that were previously targeted because of this are able to start selling that again. So hopefully we'll see that added to their bottom line. So with that, a few other stories. This one from Tom Engel. Interesting is apparently the National Institute on Drug Abuse wants to create a national medical cannabis registry to track how patients are obtaining and using cannabis, as well as their health outcomes, including whether there's a reduction in prescription drug use. And so this just strikes me as Big Pharma telling the NIDA, hey, we need to research how much money we're going to lose if we slowly allow, cannabis reform to take place incrementally. And so, because obviously Big Pharma wants to know how patients are obtaining and using cannabis, and they certainly want to know if there's going to be a reduction in prescription drug use. And from what we know, I believe there has been a large reduction in prescription drug use already. So Big Pharma is getting scared, and they're trying to get all the data they probably can in order to stay relevant as long as possible. While this one comes from Todd Harrison. Thanks, Todd. As Johnson & Johnson asked the FDA to chip away at cannabinoid regulations. And so again, another example of the influence of Big Pharma and some of these government organizations. And if we've learned anything over the last few years, especially if you've been paying attention, the FDA and big pharmaceutical companies are a little too close for comfort, as they certainly should not be, because the agency that regulates big pharmaceutical companies should not receive any sort of funding from big pharmaceutical companies. Yet apparently about 50 to 70% of the funding the FDA gets comes from Big Pharma. So yes, that's a conflict of interest, but I digress. Just here to share the stories. Apparently Johnson & Johnson has joined the course of businesses. And so I don't know what the course of businesses are, but obviously it's good that many businesses have been asking U.S. health regulators to develop basic safety rules for cannabinoids in foods and dietary supplements. So again, small steps in the right direction, but the full article is here if you wanted to check. Well, lastly, just wanted to share some insight from other MSO investors as they speculate based on all the moving parts of what we can see from now until the end of November, especially since we saw nothing from when the Dems took over up until now. And so with that, Young City tweets, "It's now or never for Canna reform, assuming a red wave in November," which seems pretty inevitable. And then Chris Norman responds to that, "Absolutely true. Schumer's recent pivot on safe banking negotiations appears to be an acknowledgement that Republican-controlled Senate and House in 2023 is inevitable. Midterms no longer contested, Canna reform no longer a political pawn." And so there's a few other things he wrote down here. McConnell can't block a Senate vote on any cannabis reform legislation until January, if there is a red sweep. Best he can do now to stop safe banking in 2022 is try to whip every single Republican Senate vote, and that ain't happening. And so lastly, seems like some people deleted some of their tweets here, pussies, but with this, Christopher Norman adds, "Schumer and Booker are in New York and New Jersey. You think they're going to create roadblocks to set up fledgling adult use legal cannabis to fail in their respective states and let McConnell starve the cannabis industry on financial oxygen? I don't." And so while we don't know, this is still just speculation. What do you think? Do you agree or do you disagree? Let me know in the comments, as I'd love to hear what you think, as apparently the stage is set and all we can do is really wait from now until then. But that is it for today's episode, folks. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody.